Hey everyone, Aaron here with Elite Watersports, and today's video is all about used gear. Kiteboarding can be super affordable. You don't have to go out and buy the latest and greatest and look for those sales deals for brand new equipment. There's tons of equipment out on the used market. And remember that Elite Watersports does have a certified program to make sure that you can buy with confidence and comes with a 30-day warranty. Now with these tips and tricks, we'll be going through everything that we do at the shop. Remember, we are going to do it a little bit more detailed, but these are the bare basics, all right? So stay tuned and like and subscribe to our videos so we can keep them coming to you. So if you find yourself browsing the internet and trying to find that special deal, whether it's on Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or a local rider, there are certain things that you're going to want to make sure that you look over on the bar and the kite, the equipment that you're about to purchase. Now, with our extensive knowledge and kite repair background here at Elite Watersports, we know what wears out fastest. And this video is going to help you look at those different items, okay? First off, with the bar being wrapped up, you're going to look at the very ends of the lines. Remember, we can't go over everything, but these are going to be the key items that we see most often. Where those pigtails come together and they go to the ends of the lines, you see a lot of wear right about here, where the smaller line and the bigger line comes together and they're flexing back and forth. Additionally, right where that splice ends, where the line gets thin again, you'll see a lot of flex and wear and tear right there. Now this Spectra is made to kind of break down over time, and what it really is made of all these little small fibers all coming together, and over time they're going to break down a bit. So as it becomes more fuzzy, as it starts to sun bleach, as more materials are introduced like salt and grime and sand and whatnot, this line will break down. It's not going to last forever. So look at the pigtails, make sure they are good to go. Now these are sacrificial, you can always replace these, so that's not the end of the deal if these are worn out. So as you go through the bar, go ahead and unwrap them. When you unwrap them, go ahead and string them out on the yard or out in the open so that you can run your fingers right down the lines and make sure there's no abrasions, cuts, or knots. Any knots or abrasions, that's a no-go. You're going to have to replace that line. You can't put life safety on a line with any nicks, scratches, or tears, or any kind of knots, okay? As you go ahead and unwind that bar, make sure that you're looking for key components. If you're buying on the high end of the spectrum, you shouldn't have broken bungees, you shouldn't have worn out and faded lines and whatnot, so you're looking out for all that stuff. You can go ahead and, as you stretch those lines out, and start looking through them, make sure there's no knots, just like I said earlier. But with the key features at the very end, where you do the most adjusting, is going to be the most amount of wear. Now all these parts are replaceable, again re-emphasizing that the bar should be appropriately priced for what you're getting for it. If you're at like 25-30 uses, well, most bars last for about 100 or more uses. You're at the front end of the spectrum on how long that bar should be lasting. You know, 75% left, the bar should maybe be $300 or $400. Maybe if it's 50% life left, maybe it should be in that $150 to $200 range, so on and so forth. All right, so wearable items are going to be like the trim. Make sure that the trim, the bungee, the area right here is not too broken down, not too worn out. On the safety side of things, where the safety line goes through this bracket, 90% of the bars out there have this bracket, that gets worn out over time if somebody's using their eject over and over and over again. Our school bars, we have to typically take our bars out every month to 2 months, sometimes 3 months. That way that the bars don't get too worn out where we can't resell them and they have zero value. Now remember, again, all parts are replaceable, right? As I kind of watch or I look down this middle line, the main line right here, and looking for another wearable item, okay? And then I also want to make sure that the eject works. So go ahead and click it in a couple times, make sure it's free and open, and also make sure it's engaging right away. If there's any sand or debris, it could be just not a well-maintained bar, and you can clean it. Maybe perhaps you're going to save some money for somebody that believes that this doesn't work as nice, and you can just clean it and make it work for yourself. You can pull out the safety line, make sure it's all the bungee's all intact, chicken lube, chicken sticks all connected, and you're just doing a broad overview on the bar. make sure everything's looking good, okay? If you wanted to get really technical, you can go ahead and do a bar tuning on it and see how out of whack that is, and see if that previous rider has been maintaining their bar as far as the tuning goes. Look out for our other video on bar tuning, and that will give you a little bit further in-depth detail on that. So that's the bar side of things. Make sure you just use some common sense. If you see some lines kind of worn out, faded, and fuzzy, chances are they're towards the end of their life expectancy. Let's move on to the kite. So although the bar is probably one of the most important life safety side of things, make sure that bar is awesome and not worn out, the kite, of course, is going to be primarily the big side of the purchase, all right? When you show up to that sales deal you just found on Marketplace or even at the shop, you know, the kites are going to be in the bag. And for us, we want to take them out and show them to our clients and whatnot. But if you're showing up on the street and you're looking at it, guaranteed that guy is going to have it in his bag, or that lady is going to have it in the bag, and they're going to say one thing, and that's going to be, oh yes, it holds air, it's in great shape, okay? But we want to do a full visual inspection and go through that kite and making sure that is exactly as advertised, all right? So on this kite, we've already have it pumped up. That's what I want you to do. Pump it up and look it over. Find a nice little grass patch and get it full of air. And then what you're gonna do first off, right after you pump it up, is go through the leading edge. The leading edge is probably the hardest thing to repair, okay? It also has the most structural integrity. Canopy tears and scratches can be fixed very easily with tape or by professionals by putting a panel in there, but leading edges, you need professionals to do. You can't repair the leading edge, at least not effectively and long term, all right? So you're gonna visually inspect the whole entire leading edge for any scratches or tears, and if you see any bladder exposed, it is a no-go, almost deal breaker, unless you know somebody that can repair it professionally. If you happen to find one of those scratches or tears, make note of it and also advise the seller of your concerns. Like I said earlier, the leading edge is the one thing you cannot repair. You have to go to a professional. You have to get somebody to sew it, okay? So we're looking all the way throughout. Now where the most wear points are going to be is typically on the wingtips where they swoop down or they slam into the beach where somebody's like tipping it over constantly. You also see like the companies put these wear guards on here to help protect that, but sometimes that's not good enough, all right? After you inspect the leading edge and you really approve that, what you're going to do is go ahead and hold the kite upside down, or right side up rather, and look up into the sunlight for any scratches or tears. One thing is for certain, that you can go through the canopy and visualize it, and like look at it, look through it and whatnot, and try to be as detailed as possible. But if you look underneath the canopy up towards the sunlight, it's going to expose any tears or cuts right away. They're going to be really super obvious. So look at both sides of it, look at all the canopy, and any points that maybe are not exposed, like right here towards the leading edge, and look at all the different like stitching, or if there's any repairs. Sometimes the buyer may not even, or the seller may not even know about any repairs that were previous done when they bought the kite. That happens from time to time. Or maybe possibly a kite came in for trade-in and we just didn't see it, just because we can actually sew these panels in perfectly the same as the factory, okay? The canopy has a lot to do with how long that kite's going to last. If you look at this kite, it's been in the commercial setting for about 6 months now of heavy commercial school use, all right? It's going to show wear and tear and signs of, you know, deterioration. Doesn't mean like this kite is totally toast. It just means it doesn't have as much value as a kite that doesn't have these kind of wear points. So if you look closely, you'll see that the material has broken down in this area. And as you see that North put a nice batten right here to help with some of that wear and tear and help to strengthen that trailing edge of the kite to not wear out so much. So eventually, like a flag in the wind, it's going to wear out with that constant flap. If you notice, as you go closer to the leading edge, there's no signs of wear But if you go all the way back to that trailing edge, you'll see right on the end of the fabric. Like I said, this is a commercial kite. It's going to have that kind of wear and tear. So you're going to keep your eyes right on that trailing edge and go back and forth and notice that, hey, this kite is probably at 50% life. Doesn't mean that this thing's toast. This thing will last another year or so, but you know, hey, you should save some money if it's starting to look like this, okay? Sometimes the kite is possibly flapping and hitting on the beach the whole entire time. So don't just look at the top of the canopy, roll it over and look at the bottom of it and see what kind of wear that might be coming from shells or sand or roughness on the beach. The last thing I'd like to say about the canopies is the old age saying was crispy like new. That's a thing of the past because not every kite company is going to use the same materials. As we advance in this industry, we're going to create new materials that aren't crispy, okay, that don't have those polys, laminates and stuff on them. All right, so get to know the brands a little bit and understand that, like this North brand, sure, it's going to be on the crispier side, but not like other comparable brands. All right, so get to know the fabrics a little bit and understand that doesn't mean that it needs to be crispy to be or have a lot more life left into them. All right, the last thing I like to say is that, hey, anything can be repaired. Pinholes and all that, put a little bit of piece of tape like type A on both sides, boom, you're out in the water right away. But longer cuts or abrasions or any kind of repairs like that, where a professional needs to step in and change that panel out, that's also something that you can put in your negotiation. Now, we do have like brand new kites that come into the shop or for trade-ins or out of our demo fleet, and we do have a repair from time to time, like say a tree or a bad landing, or maybe possibly it got snagged on the jet ski trailer in our lesson center. Could be a brand new kite with a small little repair like that. Well, you'll never have issues with that repair for the rest of its life. So it has actually zero factor other than a cosmetic. And if a professional shop like ourselves are repairing that kite, you may not even notice that it was ever repaired. So just go through it, make sure that you and the seller are on the same page. Make sure you're confident in that. Now, going over to the bridles, some bridles are going to have pulleys. Some aren't going to have pulleys. And when they don't have pulleys, you won't have to worry about too much of wear and tear on that section where a pulley would naturally be. But sometimes people make mistakes and the bridle is fed wrong. They go out and fly for 10 or 15 minutes and you might have some wear on those lines. So just visually inspect all the lines just like you did on the bar. Make sure there's no cuts, knots. Additionally, you can look at the pigtails, which are replaceable. They're kind of sacrificial. You can buy them at your local shops. So those are going to be wearable items. So make sure that that pigtail looks nice and clean, not too fuzzy, sun bleached, torn up, whatnot. Going over to the wingtip, remember you have additional pigtail and then you have an additional leader line going from that. Some kites will even go to the extent, or brands will go to the extent of having them marked for what kite, what year, what size, and you can see if those have been replaced or mixed matched with other sizes or other brands. Hey, so air is a big deal. Without air, we have no rigidity in our skeleton to hold the shape of the kite. So we're also going to look at the bladder system. The bladder system is made up of this leading edge. There's a bladder inside of it, okay? And the canvas holds its structure together, and the bladder itself is actually quite weak and fragile. What we have here is a valve that goes from the leading edge to the struts. These are two separate different bladders connected by a piping system and a valve in between, or a alligator clamp, okay? That alligator clamp can be clamped off to discontinue the communication of air between this strut and this strut, okay? Or this leading edge. So we want to actually visually inspect these tubes. Now, if we're looking at a kite that's only 2 or 3 or 4 years old, tubes are usually going to be just fine. But if we're looking in that 3 to 4 or 5 year old mark, we should actually visually inspect those tubes, because they do actually deteriorate and they start sticking, and they actually start to become kind of sticky, and actually the materials will start sticking to the canopy, okay? These are probably the most concerning and the thing that fails the most out of older kites. If the valves are still good. And what I mean by the valves actually are heat welded to the bladder. They're not glued, they're heat welded to the bladder, okay? And that process of which actually deteriorates over time, especially if that kite's being stored in a garage or any uncontrolled environment, climate. So one question you could ask is like, hey, where were these kites stored? Were they in your garage? Were they in your house? Were they in a controlled environment? Or were they just floating around in the back seat of your car when it's 140 degrees out, or inside that interior, all right? And in which case, that's a no-go. Move on, let's get something else, unless it's the right price. All of this can be repaired, but if you're getting into bladders and repairing them and doing it the correct way, not gluing the valves back on, you could be looking at $300 to $400 after everything is said and done. So it's a real quick overview. Use some common sense on the kite. If it is pretty beat up, well, you know, it shouldn't be priced too high. But if it's looking pretty brand new, well, it's equivalent to buying maybe you know, a kite on closeout. Might be the latest and greatest, the kite that just came out but only used 5 or 10 times. Well, you save a little bit of money and you can buy with confidence, looking at several different items on it. You may be searching around and find something on eBay. You might be finding something on Marketplace, or that Facebook Marketplace rather, and you might find the best deal of your life. And it's like 250 bucks or 600 bucks. We hear it all the time. It seems to be in that cusp of a kite, a board, a bar, a harness, the whole shabam bam, okay? Once upon a time, that kite was the best thing ever, and that seller still believes it because they got out of kiteboarding a long time ago, all right? You need to do some research on what you're buying. Just because it says it's $600 kiteboard, bar, harness doesn't mean it is a great deal, okay? A lot of those kites are going to have issues. And I'm not talking about the canopy, I'm not talking about the bladders, which are the number one concern. We're talking about safety. And more so than not, 10 years ago, the kites were completely different. But let's be real, there were kites out there that were phenomenal and were ahead of their time. And not only their flying characteristics, but also their safety, their bar, the lines, the kite, how it flags out, the whole deal there, all right? So have some confidence. You can always call us at Elite Watersports, and although you may not be purchasing from us, we are here to help. We want to make sure that you're safe on the water and also making the right purchase. If you're looking into the used market, let's also be real. Is this something that you are interested in doing for a very long time? Although you may be capable of doing repairs and also interested in learning how things work, do you really have the time to put all that time into repairing your kite? Would you rather be a kite repair specialist on the beach repairing your kite, or would you rather be a kiteboarder? I know the answer to that. I know you're going to want to kiteboard more than do kite repairs. So go out there and get a budget together and buy with confidence. And remember, lean on us. Even if you're not purchasing from us, you can always ask us questions on whether or not it's a good deal or not. We will be real with you. All right, let's talk about some boards, right? When you buy a used board, man, I got to tell you, the number one thing in the shop that we hear is like, oh man, it has a scratch. It isn't worth anything. Dude, boards are like timeless. Timeless meaning they can go through so much abuse and they're still going to keep going. And when they don't keep going, well, that's when they're broken in half, okay? So when there's just some scratches and dings and whatnot, it doesn't really matter. Like maybe cosmetically, it might, you know, not appeal to you, but, you know, it's still going to ride the same. Face it, if you buy a brand new board, the first session out, you're going to have a scratch. So if you can save a couple dollars on maybe a board that's new, but has a couple scratches because a couple demos, a couple rides, well, pick that because you're going to do it yourself anyways, all right? Now, when you show up to buy a used board that's really discounted or possibly, you know, in that lower ballpark range, you think it's the best deal of your life because you see it looking like this in the advertisement, and you show up and it looks like this because the rider like Eric Reinstraw is just so freaking gnarly and he's just full send at all times, right? His boards are going to look like this most of the time. So what we're going to do is that if this is a great deal to buy, talking $50 to $200 for this board, we're going to look at some key things, okay? We're going to look down the rails and make sure that the rails aren't exposing any wood. The first ½ an inch of each rail on most boards out there, just about all boards out there, are going to be what is like plastic, okay? And that's made so that you can ding the edges without compromising the inside, which is typically colonial wood that are going to be high absorbent. Water's going to penetrate and then delaminate the board. Next thing you're going to look at is also the fin holes. Where the fin holes are, they also have a circular piece of plastic all the way around. And if that fin was kind of compromised by bending or breaking, possibly it will let some water into the colonial wood again. If we look down this rail, it went through the ringer, sliding, doing kickers and whatnot, or what you typically see is people sliding up on the heel side edge up onto the beach, and the heel side edge wears out. Some boards do have inline inserts, so that means that there is no heel side edge. You can have toe side, heel side, either or you have some boards that are offset centered, right, that are going to be diagonal offset, and permanently this side of the board is going to be the heel side edge, okay? So when you look at that edge, you want to make sure that there's no wood exposed once again. Looking out throughout the whole entire board, you should be able to bend it and have a nice even flex pattern throughout the whole board. If the board looks great and it has a weird flex pattern, usually underneath the foot, you know that it's delaminated and possibly ready to snap. So just do a little flex test on it and look through it. As far as the straps go, straps are just Velcro. Put your feet in there, make sure that it feels good underneath them, and make sure all the Velcro works, and make sure that, you know, the plastics aren't all broken, okay? Just do a cosmetic look over it, and you should be able to see anything that is of concern. Lastly, I would suggest go ahead and take a screwdriver and loosen the bolts. See if they are frozen in there, if you can possibly even get them out. Some boards will have where the inserts actually break, but it's still attached to the straps are still attached to the board, but you'll never be able to get that screw out, and you're stuck with the straps on the board permanently, okay? So take the screws out or loosen them, put them back in, and that'll be about it for as far as the board goes. So remember that just because the board has a couple dings or scratches, whatever, it is not the end of its life. These things outlast forever. As far as technology goes, hey man, if you want to buy a 10-year-old board, well, you're going to have 10-year-old technology. Believe it or not, every year we are improving boards. We're improving the water channels, how the water flows, and what the boards are made for. And we're really specifically designing these boards to feel a certain way. So you have to put that in the factor when you go to buy a board. Just because it's a good deal doesn't mean it's right for you. I mean, a bolt, which is for wake style, is going to be absolutely horrible for you as a beginner. So don't go buying it because it's $100. Go buy yourself a beginner board that's flatter, squarer, easier to edge upwind. If you have to, spend a couple $100 more to get that right board for you. Just because it's cheap does not mean it's a deal.
I mean, it's not that bad, is it? Like, it's only just like barely showing the wood. Like, JB Weld will cover that. I could sand that. Like, I mean, fill that with P-Tex. I mean, it's fresh on top, man. It's only, you know, it's not even snapped yet. This thing's like 7 years old.
It's good to go.
Yeah.
Last but not least, the harness is a big deal. It's all about comfort, but a little bit about safety. Safety-wise, just look at the straps, make sure they're not dry rotted or frayed or anything of concerns. Remember, the harness is being what is pulling you off the water and keeping you riding. Make sure that it's going to hold that weight that you put on there. Last but not least, we want to make sure that we're emphasizing and setting the standard here. These harnesses are specifically made for you. You should go into your local shop like Elite Watersports and use their selection and vast variety to find the perfect fit for you. It is much like trying on a bunch of different pairs of shoes that are all the same size, but one's going to be the perfect fit. So go out there, splurge a little bit, find a harness that's going to be super comfortable so it's a better experience out there on the water. So to conclude, used gear can be confusing, but hopefully this video has helped you out to be more confident in your purchasing. We'd like to conclude also that, you know what, Elite Watersports is here for you. We have a huge selection of used gear, from kites to boards to harnesses, just about everything out there. And remember, we do certify them, okay? We go through all the things that we've just taught you in this video. We go through that in our equipment to make sure that we can provide that 30-day warranty to make sure you are super satisfied and that gear is going to hold up to the test of time. This is Aaron with Elite Watersports, and we'll see you on the water.